All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about the whole schools topic. I talked about it the other day, and I wanted to make another video about it because it's a pretty important topic, especially because it's being talked about a lot in Alberta, and I know Ontario, and I mean I assume it's a pretty important topic in pretty much everywhere. But got a Thomas Sowell quote up here, and again, a very, very incredibly articulate guy. So let's read it and let's talk a little bit about it. If you're serious about wanting to improve education, do not vote for more money for the education establishment that has been dumbing down the schools for years. Vote for vouchers, tax credits, or anything else that would transfer decision making power to parents. Now, the problem, I mean, there's many problems that come up with this. The left constantly complains about public schools and, oh, we need more funding and all this garbage. The problem with that is that, I mean, for starters, there's nothing you can possibly say to get them to admit they're wrong. If you ask them, I'd like to hear what a leftist would have to say if you ask them the question of, um, is there any possible way that you would support a system that had competitors to public schools? Like, I'd really like to hear an answer to that question. Now, I don't think that they would have a good answer. I think that the answer would just deflect. It would probably, my guess is that they would deflect away from it being, oh, we just need to fund public schools more. If we just funded them more, they would provide a better education. And they would probably just throw out the, oh, you just want to, or the old, oh, private schools and charter schools just benefit the rich argument, which isn't true. I mean, it's true to some extent, but it isn't true as a whole. In that if you give people vouchers, then the poor can go to private schools or charter schools as well. And the simple reason why is that public schools are incredibly bloated. I mean, incredibly bloated. Teachers make a lot more than they should, especially when you consider all the benefits and the pension and the time off. Um, they make a heck of a lot more than they should. I mean, when you add up all the pension and the salary and all the benefits, they literally probably should be getting like half of what they're getting. And that's not to be mean to teachers. It's just a simple reality that public school teachers are about average when it comes to intelligence. And the fact that they make $80,000, $90,000 a year salaries plus 3 months off throughout the year, plus you have some of the best pensions that exist, that's not even it's not even funny too. Like that's when you add all the benefits and the money up, that's something that, like, engineers should be getting, like doctors. Not I mean, maybe that's a little bit below their pay grade, but still, like um when you add up actually based off hourly, I mean, hourly and time off, teachers I mean, prorated. Teachers are making well north of $100,000 a year, and median salary is like 50,000, and it may even be going down. It probably, given we're coming out of this whole virus situation, but teachers are very much overpaid too. And here's the thing too about teachers is that if you want to think that I'm wrong about that, that's perfectly fine. I would be perfectly fine if you agree with me. The problem is that if you think that teachers are actually worth that much money, then they would have no problem making that much money in a privatized or a charter system. They would have no problem doing that because they're worth that much money. Um, I mean, let's just assume that athletes got paid based off forcing people to pay them money, because that's how teachers are paid. That people are forced to pay their taxes, and teachers get paid through that. If someone doesn't pay their taxes, they get thrown in jail. So again, this is something that I really cannot stand about the left, is that they pretend that you're not forced to pay for them. Of course you're forced to pay for them. You're forced to pay for them by definition. So let's stop pretending that's not the case. Um, and that's the problem too, is that if you actually were worth that much money, you wouldn't have to force people to do it. Now they always resort to the whole it's about the kids, we care about the kids argument. Well, if that was the case, then why did all those teachers that were on strike in, where was it, Ontario, I believe, why did they not well, why don't they strike over the weekend? Why don't they strike over holidays? There was a holiday and they stopped striking. So again, it has nothing to do with the kids. It has nothing to do with the kids. If it had anything to do with the kids, you wouldn't have to strike to do it. You wouldn't have to strike. Again, they want more money. And this is the thing about public school teachers, especially from, I mean, I don't think I've hardly met one who isn't like this. um, in that they're very comfortable with I mean, in other words, they've they've been lied to so much, and they've lied to themselves so much that they actually believe the lie. They actually believe they're worth that much money, and like any person who works, you think that I mean, once you get comfortable, you want more, right? You want more, because once you get comfortable with something, it's not enough anymore. You need more. Like once you're hooked on a drug, all of a sudden that it's the amount that you're doing isn't enough. So you have to take more and more and more to get the same effect. And it's the same thing with teachers too, is that it's gotten to their head that they're worth the $100,000 a year with 3 months off and best pensions that exist. It's gotten to their head that they actually think that they're worth that much. The reason that they're worth that much is because they've fooled everybody into believing that they're a lot more valuable to society than they actually are. And if it wasn't for them, no one would be educated, which is complete and utter garbage. It couldn't be any more false. And the other thing about public school teachers too that kind of just disproves the idea that they're worth so much is that um, homeschooled kids score very similar. In fact, I believe in they're actually slightly better in some areas, but there's almost no discernible difference between the test out of the states that the score that you get to need to get to get into college. I forget exactly what they call it. The SAT, I think, is what it is. Um, Homeschooled kids score almost exactly the same as non-homeschooled kids. So again, if public school teachers are so good, then why aren't kids out of public schools scoring so much higher? And you can't possibly make the not enough funding argument. Like again, like the average kid. I mean, the government is allocating like $10,000 per kid, so you can't possibly make the argument. I mean, you got a class of 25 kids. That's $250,000. Now, again, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think I'm almost sure it's around 10,000. So the idea that public schools are underfunded is an absolutely and utterly insane argument to make. And the reason why, I mean, going full circle here, is that the reason that the left is so adamantly against school choice is that everybody knows, and even the left will. I mean, they won't admit it, but you'll get them to the point to where the way they're making their argument, they're admitting it, and that you'll get into an argument with them about public schools versus charter schools, and they'll say, oh, public schools are better, and then you'll debunk them on that. And the simple reason too is that public schools have no reason to improve. They have no reason to get better because they have no competition. And the other thing too is that if public schools do a terrible job, they don't go out of business. They don't lose their jobs because their solution to it is always, oh, we don't have enough money. If a charter school does a terrible job at teaching kids, no one wants to go to that school anymore and they go out of business. So charter schools are better by definition for the simple reason that if they're not better than public schools, they will go out of business. So there's no possible argument you can make to say that public schools are better than charter schools, at least on average. And eventually, again, the left they'll finally get that through their head, and they'll end up making the other arguments, and that the way that they're making their argument is just flat out admitting that they're not as good. So the reason that they want to keep public schools and make it so that just public schools exist is that they know charter schools are better. I mean, they're better by definition, pretty much, and the problem is that public school teachers are overwhelmingly on the left. I mean, the unions, the public school teachers, and for the simple reason that if a voucher system was created, a lot of money wouldn't end up in leftist hands, because what happens with teachers? Well, a lot of their money ends up in unions. Unions exclusively support the left. I mean, unions in Alberta basically exist to get the NDP elected. That's basically why they exist. I mean, they basically might as well just. I mean, they might as well just say, yeah, we're the NDP. Um, so again, the reason that they want them to exist is that if just public schools existed, teachers are forced to give money to their unions. In fact, in most cases, again, you're forced to pay union dues, which is insane. I would support unions if you're not forced to support them and they're not corrupt, which they tend to be corrupt. The concept of unions I support. The problem is that they just tend to become corrupt, and they force people to pay for them, and they give the money to the left, which I cannot stand. But that's the problem too, is that in the end it comes down to money and politics. I mean, like most things in society, money and politics. in that if they actually cared about the kids, they would support school choice. If they actually thought that they were better too, because if they were actually better, they would be perfectly fine with going with it having charter competition. Again, the other argument they'll make too is, I mean, I've debunked it many times, but oh, the problem is if we go towards that system, the poor won't get an education. Well, number one, the poor still would get an education, and number two, if just public schools existed, the rich are still going to get a far better education. Why? Because I mean they're going to be better. They're going to be more well nourished. They're probably going to sleep better at night. They're probably going to be more healthy. And on top of that, the most important thing being is that if you're a rich family, you can afford to get your kid or your kids full-time tutors pretty much. You can have a tutor come over at night and help your kids with their homework and teach them any concepts that they don't understand. If you're poor, you can't do that. So the problem with the rich are going to get a better, the gap between the rich and the poor is only going to grow if we go towards a charter or a private system. It's flat out BS because the rich are going to get a way better education no matter what you do. Like, no matter what you do, they're going to get a way better education. If anything, it's the complete opposite. And in fact, it is the complete opposite for the simple reason that if you created a voucher system, how a voucher system would work is if the government allocated $10,000 per kid, parents would get a $10,000 voucher for their kid and say, hey, you can, if you want to send your kid to a public school, go ahead, give them the voucher, they'll get the money. If you want to send your kids to a private school or a charter school, go ahead, give them the money. And um, that would be the simple solution, right? So the I mean, in a nutshell, the left does not care about kids' education. If they did, they would be fully on board having charter competition. I mean, the problem too is that it's not a perfect system. Of course, it's not a perfect system because if you live in a rural area, yeah, you're probably not going to have a bunch of school choice. But the vast majority of people live in cities. And that's the problem too, is that eventually the left gets caught up in these super rare exceptions to the rule. Like, that's not how we deal with society. Like, the goal, at least from the democratic position, is to improve things for the vast majority of people. Like, and if that means that, and the other thing too is that the other people aren't worse off either. Like, even if there's no competition for people who live in rural areas, they're still not worse off. They're still in the exact same spot as they were before. And that's the thing about the left too, is that they're completely wrong about this, and that um, the poor at the worst case scenario for the poor, they're right back where they started. If competition through charter schools and a voucher system was created, worst case scenario, and I mean absolute worst case scenario, they're right back where they started. Best case scenario, they're better. In most of the case too, it's better too. I mean, you look at all these areas in the states, the poor parents are desperate to get their kids into charter schools. I mean, desperate, and for the simple reason that public schools suck. Like, they absolutely suck. And I don't mean to rag on the teachers either too. I mean, I would say the majority of them are good people. They do want what's best for people. The problem is that basic human psychology trumps everything here, and that if you work for a public school, you're paid through taxes. Taxes are forced out of people, which means there's no competition, which means you have no incentive to improve. I mean, it would be like if all pro athletes were paid the same. I mean, what incentive do you have to improve in the off season? And if your contract was guaranteed too, like you signed a 10-year contract and you guaranteed to get all the money, like of course people aren't going to train in the off season at least nearly as hard. I mean, so again, that's the thing with public schools, is that I don't think that, I mean, a lot of the individuals are terrible. I would say I probably would say the majority of them are pretty, at least when it comes to politically. I mean, I don't think they're exactly killing kittens in their spare time or anything along those lines. When it comes to these people politically, yeah, the clear majority of them are pretty crazy and pretty bad. But when it comes to them personally, no. But I have seen no shortage of people that are very crazy. I went to a public school in a very rural area, and I would say probably about one third, one third, one third. One third were very good, very nice people. One third were meh, and then one third were absolutely brutal, like absolutely brutal. And I would say that the city, it's probably not the same. It's probably like two-thirds. It's probably the gap, but for good is definitely lower. The gap for bad is definitely better. There's always some people in the middle, but again, that's a different video in and of itself. I don't want to get to it too much. The point being is that I mean, I have family members who are public school teachers. So, and politics, yeah, that's different. But the point being too is that it's just basic incentives. It's just basic incentives that even regardless of whether or not you think they're good people, if all the incentive in the world is created to do, at least from what I believe, and I think the evidence clearly points to that, the wrong thing, then people are going to do it. Like people are going to do it. Like that's how human psychology works too. Is that it's the are people naturally good versus naturally bad argument. The reality is that humans are driven by incentive. If enough of incentive is created to make people be bad, they will be bad, at least on average. And if enough of incentive is created for people to be good, they will be good. That's basically, in a nutshell, how it works. Um, but anyway, I just wanted to make another video about that because it's all over the news lately. Lately, at least, I mean, given the fact that there's two other massive stories going on in the news. But anyway, I'm gonna leave the video there. If you'd like to make sure that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last couple things, as always, check me out on Twitter and check me out on BitChute. All the links are in the description. It's very important that you support people that are speaking the truth these days, regardless of whether or not it's me. So make sure you check out all those links.